All right. I'd like to start out by saying Barak Atah Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Ruach Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Hit the Button, dated February 18th, 2026. The year of apostasy, agents, sellouts, and Jacob's trouble. And I don't really have anything specifically to go into, but I feel compelled to hit the button, and then that's what I'm going to do. And whatever the Spirit feeds me, I'll feed you. And pretty much, I just want to say, to you camp leaders out there, of course, be vigilant, circumspect, watch what's going on. What the scriptures, warn us of. We're not ignorant of Satan's devices and many other things. But here, 1 Peter 5:8, it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And we're in very strange times, beautiful times, strange times, crazy times. Remember, what the apostle Paul told Timothy, in 2 Timothy chapter 2. Chapter 3 and 1. It says, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. So we are in those perilous times. There's a lot of strange activity going on, a lot of, stuff that is out of the ordinary, happening, and these devils are ramping up, so brothers have got to be vigilant, and watching what's going on, watching your surroundings, watch the company you keep, watch the places you go to, because, at any time, anything can jump off, and you don't want to be caught in the middle of anything, that can be detrimental to you if you could avoid it. Now, here in the NLT says, you should know this, Timothy, that in the last days, there will be very difficult times. And this is the times that we're coming in. NIV, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. So this is why we have to be vigilant. We have to observe what's going on, and make sure that we're walking the right path. Like it says here, once again, 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Now, we look up this word vigilant. You have the word vigil, right? This in here is Gregorio, which means to be vigilant. Gregory, but also Gregory could also mean flock, like congregation. Congregation is with the flock. So it says to watch, metaphorically give strict attention, to be cautious, active, to take heed, lest through remission and indolence some destructive calamity suddenly overtake one. So we got to be vigilant of what's going on, around us. Okay. So it says, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour, whom resist steadfast in the faith. And when you are dealing with individuals that that are being vetted to come into the camp, you have to be very, very cautious, especially nowadays, because nowadays, you have a lot of agent activity going on, and you don't know who's who. You don't know who's friend or foe in certain cases. And, usually they'll come, acting as if they're cool and all this, just to get in the middle or in the circle so that they can, pretty much turn around and destroy, the congregation from within. And you have to watch for that. And this is why, pretty much, we have a very, 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 very strict, vetting process. So if you see an individual that's in the circle and you know that he's something about him is off, you got to keep your eye on him. And before you could even let it get to that, don't let that individual in the camp. Let him just stay in the outskirts. If you notice something's off, hey, you could just keep coming to the camp. Eventually you're gonna get tired of coming around and leave. And because you have individuals that come into this thing with a preconceived notion that they're gonna be the ones to be, to introduce certain things to brothers. We're not here to be taught, what you believe in. We're here to show you what the words of Yahweh Shai mean, and that's it. Now, do we learn things from? Of course, brothers going to the Hebrew and the Greek, they bring out certain information, beautiful. But as far as some old wayward bullshit, we're not here to be listening to no old wayward bullshit. You want to, get with some wayward bullshit, go to the Black conscious community, go to Areopagus, go to Mars Hill. They'll be more than willing to hear out your cause. We're not interested here. There's a strict curriculum that's being taught here at Great Millstone through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemel Shai, which is the doctrine of Yahweh Shemel Shai. And we don't need anyone coming in here wiggling some bullshit or weaving some bullshit into the faith that's already here. It's supposed to be kept pure. And we have to make sure that the individuals that are coming into this thing are coming into this thing with pure intentions and not with alternative motives or ulterior motives. Now, before I read on, here in 1 Timothy 5:21, the point is in 22. I charge thee therefore, I charge thee before the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, and the Lord Yahweh Shai Mashiach, and the elect angels, that thou observe these things without preferring one before another, doing nothing by partiality. Yeah, basically, you see, brothers, that are, doing what they're supposed to do, and you might have a brother that you might be cool with, and he may not be as diligent as another brother, but the brother that's diligent, you might not be as close to him, but he should be in a certain position outside of the man that you're cool with, but you put the man that you're cool with in there, even though he's not qualified. That's being partial. You can't do that, because it's going to fall apart, right? But this the main point: lay hands suddenly on no man, neither be partaker of other men's sins, keep thyself pure. So lay hands suddenly on no man. So there has to be a serious vetting process before anyone could come into, the inner circle of Great Millstone, into these camps, because we're not looking for followers. The Lord is not looking for individuals out there to warm seats. We're not looking for masses of people. We're just here teaching the word so that the Lord can gather his elect. We're not concerned with having hundreds of thousands of people, coming to this thing. We're not concerned with that. We just concerned with the Lord's elect, and the Lord's elect will behave a certain way. Now, would you get problems with, some of the elect? Of course. Look at the movie Braveheart. The man Stephen and the other guy came with flattery and gifts and all this stuff, right? Stephen came all rough, just just grabbing food out the pot and just, talking shit. And the guy with all the flattery, he was the one that was trying to kill William Wallace. But the dude that came in there, kind of rugged, he was the one that was cool. So you can't always go by that rule, but that is, something to look for. A guy that you get always, he's always, cool, and he wants to go above and beyond, the call of duty. You got to keep an eye on a guy like that. Not saying that if a brother's diligent and he does things for brothers, you could tell the difference between a man that's doing something from the heart and a guy that's just doing something because he's trying to get, either some inside info, or he may be an insider, or he may be a undercover, or, whatever. So now when we go here to the NOT, it says, never be in a hurry about appointing a church leader. You have to remember, this is a very important, serious, position that you're appointing these individuals to. Now, years ago, we used to listen to an individual called Michael Rivera. I'm sorry, not Michael Rivera. What was his name? Alberto Rivera. My bad. Alberto Rivera. and he studied for 27 years to be a Jesuit priest. He didn't get to the 37. No, you got to study 32 years. So he was short 5 years, but nevertheless, he knew enough to where he was well on his way to becoming, a Jesuit. And pretty much his job on the apostolic succession, because you have two offices of Jesuits. You have the temporal power, which is the individuals that are part of the Roman Catholic Church that infiltrate governments to sway the mind of the governments to the Roman Catholic Church ways. And then you have the apostolic succession, which are the group of Jesuits that infiltrate religions to turn them back to the Roman Catholic Church, And what he would do is he would go to different churches and pretty much redirect everything. So what they would do is they would go join a church, get in good with the pastor, get in good with the congregation, move up in the ranks, and then as they're moving up in the ranks, they slowly but surely changing the doctrine to maneuver them back to the Roman Catholic Church. And that's what you have in this thing. You have infiltrators, whether they're infiltrators for a church, whether they're infiltrators for the government, whether they're infiltrators for the police, or whatever the case may be. And we have nothing to hide. What you see is what you get. You brothers that's been around us, you know that what you see is what you get. What you see on camera is what you see when we're around you. So you're not going to get no extra, you're going to see us walking through walls and giving you some esoteric knowledge and some deep, dark secret of something that we work at. No. We're here doing the same thing you're doing, teaching the word in the hopes to be delivered and saved. So when you're putting a man in a position, lay hands suddenly on no man, don't be too quick to put an individual in that position. As it says in the NLT, never be in a hurry about appointing a church leader. NIV, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands. All right. So I just wanted to look up lay, suddenly. Let's see what it says for lay. Epithemi, in the active voice, to put or lay upon, to add to. See? So adding someone. In the middle voice, to have put on, bid to be laid on, to lay or throw oneself upon, to attack one, to make one. So pretty much in the act, to put or lay upon, or to add to. So don't be quick to add an individual in positions where they don't belong. You have to, be a better. I mean, I understand, you do have certain camps out there that may not have a whole lot of experience, but this is what you have regional leaders for. This is what you have counsel for. If you're not sure about something, you cast a lot. If you tried everything else and you're just not sure, then leave it in the hands of the Lord. And whatever the Lord says, then let that be. Don't go second guessing. Oh, well, maybe I don't think maybe we should do it again because I think maybe we made a mistake. No, the Lord don't make mistakes. When the disciples, which became apostles, when they cast a lot for Matthias, they didn't say, well, Lord, we're going to cast it again because, we think that justice he should really be in there because he's more, more seasoned. We think he'll be a better fit. No, they said, Lord, you which knoweth the hearts of men, which one of these two should we put in there? And then they cast a lot and it fell on Matthias. So guess what? Matthias became the 12th disciple. There was no second guessing that. Because right here in Proverbs 18:18, right? It says the lot causes contention to cease. So whatever argument there is, like when we were at the house of David, there was a situation where, after the 3 councils, I believe it was on the 3rd council, if I'm not mistaken, the Elder Apostle said, look, let's cast a lot, to see, if Cornelius is an Israelite or not, and then we'll leave it in the hands of the Lord. And then Bishop Nathaniel jumped and almost hit the ceiling and said, that's wicked, Tahar. Well, no, scripture say the lot causes contention to cease. So there's an argument. Okay, we can't come to a conclusion. Let's cast a lot on it. Whatever the lot falls on, that's the decision we're going to go with. NLT, flipping a coin can end arguments. Bottom line. NIV, casting the lot settles disputes and keeps strong opponents apart. All right. So pretty much the casting of the lot causes contention to cease. I'm going to go back to the other one, but I want to look up this word contention. Madayan, strife, contention, brawling, contention, right? So it's like a you're not sure. Okay, one part says this, the other part says that. Well, let's see what the Lord says. And whatever the Lord says, that's what we're gonna go with. And the word cease is Shabbat, meaning to put the rest. So let's go back. I want to see if there's anything else in here. Lay hands suddenly on no man. So we look up the word lay. Hands, is kair, which means pretty much to appoint someone. But this means to by the help or agency of anyone, by means of anyone. Figuratively applied to the Most High, symbolizing his might, activity, power, in creating the new universe, and upholding and preserving, and punishing and determining and controlling the destinies of men. So pretty much by the help or agency of anyone, by the means of any power. So don't be quick to appoint someone to a position, because you just need to fill in, the blanks, or you need to just put a man in this position because the position needs filling. No, you got to make sure that person is vetted. You had an individual, in the school of Connecticut, cool brother, his name was Shamaria. I'm not gonna give you his government name, but pretty much, he was a cool brother, but he just was not fit to be a leader. But we honored him as the leader because, he was there before we were, and he would just throw men in any position without vetting him. He didn't know what he was doing, and he really didn't know the scriptures like that either, but it was who was put there. Damn, they're fucking hens out there. He was put in that position. We honored him, as being in that position until he wasn't there anymore. But the bottom line is you just can't throw someone in a position because that position needs to be filled. You have men that are excellent, in being counselors. You have brothers that are excellent in administrative duties. You have brothers that are excellent in getting together, organizing. You have brothers that are excellent in setting up like a what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to think of the term. To establish rule and order. To have like there's a term for it. Like rank. And setting up like a government. You have brothers that are excellent at that, and being putting together governments. Stuff of that nature. Then you have brothers that's good in the scriptures. You have brothers that's good in the Hebrew. You have brothers that are prophets, so on and so forth. So you just can't, slap somebody in a position just because you need to fill it. There's many different offices, but there's every spirit doesn't have the same gift, as we read in Romans the 12th chapter and 1 Corinthians the 12th chapter. So you have to find the right individual to put in that position. You can't just slap anybody in there, because if you have individuals that don't belong in the body, they're a square peg trying to go into a round hole, then eventually, they're going to, destroy the flock. That's why, scriptures speak about, watching over the flock, because, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. So you have to be very careful in vetting individuals, especially in these times. And if you got a guy that you're considering bringing in to the camp, let's just say, and he's been coming around, he has a good report, but, it's like he's always bringing up some wayward bullshit, and you got to keep putting it down, then you know what? That's the individual that don't belong in the camp, because he's unstable, he's unsure, he's double-minded. You can't have an individual like that in the circle. If he wants to come to the camp, that's fine, but to have an individual like that in the camp, that's division. That causes schisms. Because whatever demon jumps on him that day, he might start telling brother, well, look, brother, this, that, and the other. And then before you know it, you have certain individuals caught up in that web. And we've seen it happen time and time again, out there in LA, with the former second head and the other two individuals I know they were high ranking men, you know. And what happened? The flat Earth, doctrine came through, and they got swept away with that flat Earth thing situation. Then you had what the hell was his name out there in Chicago, Nazariah, with the Dan thing, and then he was secretly going around teaching brothers that, but don't say nothing. And what happened? Individuals got corrupted, and individuals ended up leaving with him. So you have to be very careful who you let within the midst of the circle. All right. So let's go back to 1 Peter 5:9 now. Matter of fact, I started at 8 again. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And he's going to go for the weak. A predator never goes for the strongest prey. A predator always goes for the weakest prey, for the lame, for the sick, for the halt. They always go for the one that's an easy target. You see? And that's why it's important to build your relationship between you and Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, so that you can have a strong foundation. So when those flood of lies come, you're able to maneuver through it and not get caught up in it. Right? So verse 9, whom resist steadfast what? In the faith. So how do you resist the devil? By staying in the faith. Well, you said so-and-so. Well, no, the scriptures say this. I'm not following what you're saying. You bugged out. And that's how you resist Satan, by the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world, because you're not the only one going through what you're going through. Although sometimes you feel that way. You may feel sometimes that you're the only one that's going through the situation you're going through. Trust and believe another brother has either gone through it or is going through it. Just because a brother doesn't voice things out doesn't mean he ain't going through stuff. We all going through shit. From Elder Pastor on down, we all go through shit. Some men hold stuff in, other men are open book with it. Me, myself, I just happen to be an open book with it. I talk about shit that fucks with me, but other men don't do that, because that's just not their nature. That's just not their spirit. Other brothers may every once in a while say something. It depends on the brother's spirit. But nevertheless, we all going through the same shit. There's no temptation that is taken you, but such as is common to men. But the Lord will, with that temptation, make a way that we may be able to escape it. And that's the difference. You see? So how do we resist? Steadfast in the faith. Finally, brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Right? It says, but the Most High power of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Yahushua Mashiach, after that he hath suffered a while. And see, this is one thing that individuals out there do not take into account: the suffering. They're not willing, to go through the suffering in order to become better. Matter of fact, let's type this in. No pain, right? No gain, meaning. You've all heard it. I'm pretty sure everyone that's watching has heard it. No pain, no gain. Suffering is necessary in order to achieve something. Bottom line, what does no pain, no gain mean? No pain, no gain is a popular English idiom that combines the phrases no pain, no hardship or struggle, and no gain, no success or achievement. The idiom conveys the idea that effort, sacrifice, and perseverance are essential to achieving success in anything that you do. Whatever it is, you're going to go through the ups and downs. You're going to go through trials and tribulations, because these trials and tribulations are what's going to mold you for what you are determined to do, or determined to be in this truth. I was watching, Spirit had me watching at the camp house yesterday, had me watching these different samurai, documentaries, and there was a situation where there was one particular master, and his whole thing was about teaching his men, the necessity of perfect form, perfect, you have to make sure the form is perfect, flawless, good, every time, boom, boom, boom. And that's all he stressed on. So pretty much it was all about looking good, because I'd be too busy looking good. Inside joke, but he never stressed on hardship, being hardened, So when the particular warrior that was one of the top warriors as far as their form was concerned, when he was called to go to war, right, he was doing good within the first hour. He was taking cats out. His form was perfect, immaculate. But what happened? As time progressed, his hands started hurting, his shoulders started hurting, he started faltering, but that perfect form, wasn't helping him. So what happened was this one individual that really wasn't a great fighter, he was clumsy, he wasn't that good, ended up killing him. Why? Because that individual happened to be a farmer that was used to the rigidness of working with his hands, and building up strength, and building up endurance and building up conditioning. So he was able to outlast him. So although he wasn't a better fighter, he was in better condition because this other individual was relying more on form and perfect form than he was on, on hardship and building strength, building, the bones and all of that, So I say that to say this, that no pain, no gain. And that's the same thing in the truth. So individuals that come into this thing, they're not looking, to suffer. And that's a part of, what they call growing pains, but it's also the rite of passage. All right, matter of fact, rite of passage meaning. Rite of passage meaning. Rite of passage, a ceremony or event making an important stage in someone's life, especially birth. Now, what is meant by rite of passage? A rite of passage is a significant event or ritual that makes a transition in an individual's life, often occurring at key stages such as birth, adolescence, marriage, and death. These ceremonies, which can be religious or secular, serve to impart meaning to major life changes and reinforce societal values. Okay, so that's the rite of passage. You have to go through these struggles. When we read the scriptures, it's all about struggles. Lamentation, mourning, and woe. It's all about struggles. Struggles. Inside joke. So Matthew 13, right? The parable of the sower, there were 4 different types. So this one here, Matthew 13:18, hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. It says, when anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away that which is sown in his heart. This is he that receives seed by the wayside. And all the brothers that's been out there, that's taught at the camp, I'm sure they have experienced this or seen somebody, they may not have been speaking, they might have been reading, or they might have been holding posts, but nevertheless, you experience an individual coming up and listening, right? And he might start, to come around, but then maybe a phone call comes in, or maybe a woman with a fat ass comes through, or maybe, he gets a call from this job that he's been trying to get for the longest, that they kept denying him, but all of a sudden he gets the job. So what happens? This is he which received seed by the wayside, because what was sown in his heart, Satan came and took it out. That's one example. Second example, but he that receiveth seed into stony places, right? We know individuals like this. The same as he that heareth the word and anon with joy receiveth it, right? Oh man, this truth is beautiful. He's a dynamic speaker. Sparks of lightning shoots out his ass and cuts down, redwood trees. He makes a new Grand Canyon from the hard speeches that he gives. He causes lightning and thunder to come, London and Titan to come down. Inside joke, and everything is spectacular. But what happens? Yet he had no root in himself. It's just a temporary thing, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, by and by he is offended. Why? Because he never understood what he was really involved in. he never counted the cost. We've had individuals come on the comment board years ago, going back like 2007, 8, around there, 2007, 7, 8, 9, around there. My family's coming against me, man. My mother. And I'm reading the comment. I'm like, huh? What you think this was about? You think that when you come into this thing, you're in the kingdom of heaven already? I mean, mentally, through the truth, yeah, we are. But there's a passage, there's a road, and that's a straight and narrow path. And that's why you hear Elder Apostle Gabar say a lot. A lot of you guys don't understand what you're involved in. And I echo that sentiment. I've said it many times myself. Because you never, you have, look. Let me tell you something, okay? Inside joke, but I'm gonna give you a little story, right? I'm gonna give you a little story. All right, school in Connecticut. Rewind back to 94, 95, around there. Can't remember exactly what year, but it was way back in the day, back in the times, right? When we had the school, you had an individual by the name of Badal Mayum, and that's a whole another scenario. Pistol Pete himself, inside joke. And he pretty much volunteered to go pick the apostles up, in New York. So when he got back, we're like, licking our chops, waiting to hear, give us some, fill us in on, what's going on, we wanted to know, what happened, what did you learn, Oh yeah, I went and hung out with them. It wasn't all that. And I was like, huh? Now I got mad. I got mad as fuck when he said that. Like in my mind, I'm like, what the fuck, And then I told the apostles about it, and he said, what the fuck this guy thought? We're gonna walk through walls, go sit in the corner, levitating. And then when it came around, the elder apostle Tahar said, we need somebody to come pick us up. And he was one of the ones that had a car, and my ex-woman had a car. And I said, I'll come pick y'all up, And then when I went to go pick them up, the only thought in my mind is, I'm going to catch hell. I'm going to catch hell. I'm going to catch hell. And boy, oh boy, if that didn't come true. But you know what? Barakatah Yahweh Shemal Shai gave me the mental, give me the insight to understand that, and the mental fortitude and the inner fortitude to deal with it. You see? So you have to know what you're involved in. When you read the scriptures is all about sorrow, lamentation, mourning, woe. Until we get to the kingdom. There was very few times that Jake had respite, or however you say the word, respite. There was very few times where Jake, had really a good time. One of the main times was 40 years of King Solomon. But they were catching hell too because of the taxes. Respite, a short period of rest or relief from something difficult or unpleasant. See? So there was very little respite for us, back then. All throughout, even to this day. All right? But nevertheless, if you read these things and you're involved in the very thing that you're reading about, you have to put yourself in the mindset of, if this is what them men were going through, then that means we're going to go through it too. That's what we read in 1 Peter 5 and 9, whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. So that's what we're going to go through, right? So going back to Matthew 13, it says, yet had he no root in himself, but endures for a while. For when tribulation and persecution arises because of the word, by and by he is offended. Let's look up this word offended, then we're going to go back to Peter. And I had I thought about, mentioning about lay hands suddenly on no man, but obviously this is what the Spirit wanted me to talk about. This is what, somebody needs to hear. Somebody or a few somebodies need to hear this message. Maybe this is a comfort. Maybe, brother was, really contemplating in his mind about about this situation. You know, I don't know. I'm just following what the Spirit is giving me. So lock it for a minute. Oh man, this is so good. You brothers out there, a few sisters, you want you a really, really good juice? You know, get you some beets, organic preferably, and some fennel, some fresh fennel. You know, like the actual the actual one you get at the store, not the seeds, but the actual veggie or vegetable, and juice both of those together. My goodness, that is so refreshing. That's man, that's good. That's fire. That's fire, Joe. Okay, so when we look up the word offended, right? I'm sorry, that's what we looked up, right? I just want to make sure. Yep, by and by he is offended. You have the word scandalizo, which is where you get the word scandal from, right? It says to put a stumbling block or impediment in the way, upon which another may trip and fall, metaphorically to offend. So pretty much, what is the thing that was put in the way for them to trip and fall over, or the stumbling block? That suffering that they never, you know, thought to think about. Well, if you read in the scriptures, if you study in the scriptures, right, and you see that the men of the Lord are going through all type of hell, that means that that's going to happen to you too, right? And if it, and Yahushua said, you know, the servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted the Lord, they're going to persecute us. You know, if they call him the devil, how much more us? So these are things you have to consider. This is all part of the basic fundamental building blocks of the scriptures, you know, to build up your inner fortitude, to build up your spiritual man. Because these are things that we're not taught in the world. Now, as far as hardships are concerned, yeah, you know, we grew up, you know, in hardships, you know, growing up in the ghetto, the hood, the barrio, and all that, you know, on the res. These are hardships, you know, but you know, we have to also, you know, take on the hardships of this truth, you know, because there's a lot of wicked shit that comes with it, you know, a lot of, you know, trials and tribulations, a lot of wicked slanderers, you know. Yahushua, perfect man, son of the Most High, Yahweh, right? What happened to him? He was, false witness was brought upon him. They hated him for what? For telling the truth. So pretty much we have to get our minds to put our minds to there, you know. I believe that's First Peter. That's First Peter 4:1. Just bear with me. You know, so you know, I guess somebody or a few somebodies need to hear this. This is First Peter 4:1. For as much then as Yahushua have suffered for us in the flesh, did not Yahushua suffer for us? Of course. So if he suffered for us, what does that mean for us? We're going to have to suffer too. St. John the 15th chapter. It says, for as much then as Yahushua has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. You see? So we have to arm ourselves with the same mind. I want to look this up in the NLT, so just bear with me. First Peter 4:1 in the NLT. So then, since Yahushua has suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude he had. The servant is not greater than his master. If Yahushua suffered, how much more we going to suffer? You know, because if we are without chastisement, Lord, when we get that next, then are we bastards and not sons? Because it said that it pleased the Most High to bruise Yahushua. So how much more us? We're becoming the jewels of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. And if you know anything about jewelry making, it's not a pretty sight. It's not an easy thing. It takes a lot of steps. You know, it takes a lot, you know, from rough to finish. A lot of dedication. A lot of chipping away at you know, at impurities and all of that. But what happens after it's finished? Such a beautiful piece you look at. Most people go to the jewelry store and they pick out jewelry, you know, to buy, you know. I'm talking about authentic shit, and they look at the beauty of the stone or the ring or the bracelet or the necklace or whatever the case may be, or the earrings. But not once have they ever thought, unless they were jewelry makers, not once have they ever thought the process it took to make that thing look so beautiful from start to finish. And that's what's happening right now. We're going through a process of becoming beautiful jewels for Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, but no one sees the process of what took place or what's taking place to get that perfection, to get that pure, refined, you know, piece of jewelry. Like most people that go to the jewelry store, next time you pass by a jewelry store, just look at some of those pieces and just think of, damn, I wonder how much work went into this. And if you look up, you can look up videos on jewelry making. You see the man's hands, or you know, whoever's making the jewelry, they got all kind of cuts on their hands. Their hands look all rough from making that jewelry. You see? NLT, so then since Yahweh suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude he had and be ready to suffer. See? Be ready to suffer too. For if you have suffered physically for Yahweh, you have finished with sin. See? The NIV, therefore, since Yahweh suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. So let's go from there. Okay, we have Scandalizo. So we get the point. By and by, he is offended, right? So let's finish up here in 1 Peter 5 and 10. But the Most High, the power of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Yahweh HaMashiach, after that you have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. See? So it's a process. You got to go through the suffering for a little while. Then you become perfected. Then you become established. Then you become strengthened. Then you become settled. That's why the Apostle Paul said, how I am pain until Yahweh shall be formed in you. You see? Bear with me a second. All right, now let's go from there to Hebrews chapter 12. And I was going to start a little further down, but Hebrews 12 and 5. And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourges every son that whom he receiveth. Now let's look up a couple of these words. So if you are going through chastising or chastening, then we should count it joy, because then we know that well, maybe we do find favor in the sight of the Lord. Maybe there is a chance that the Lord is really dealing with me, especially if we go through it and the Lord gives us the ability to get through it, fight through it. The word is diua. It says to train children. See, and when you train, training is hard. It's difficult. You could go light, you could go hard, you could go medium. But the more effort you put into it, the more results you get. Right? To be instructed or taught or learn, to cause one to learn, and that's chastening. And this is a part of the chastening. And this is what cats get offended over, because they thinking that, they're thinking the way that the world thinks. If you love somebody, just let them do whatever they want. No, that's total hate. If you see somebody doing something that's harmful to themselves and you let them continue on, I just love them, I don't want to say nothing because I don't want to offend them, then you don't really love them, you really hate them. But now if you sharply rebuke them, even though they get mad at you, well, guess what? If they're really wise, they'll learn from that and they'll love you. It says to chastise or castigate with cords, to correct. It says of those who are molding the character of others by reproof and admonition. And this is what we're doing, molding the character of others by reproof and admonition. This is what we get on the ISUPK, we get on the IUIC, and we get on those different groups. Sometimes we get on Zabak, priest Zabak, or elder priest Zabak. Sometimes we get on elder priest Danyala. You know, we'll get on different individuals. It's an admonishment of love, but they perceive it as hate or jealousy. We're jealous of them. You have nothing that we want. You have nothing for us to be jealous of. You know, our attitude, we take the attitude of Songs of Solomon, the 8th chapter. You know, Songs of Solomon, chapter 8 and 1. Oh, that thou wert as my brother that sucked the breast of my mother. When I should find thee without, I would kiss thee. Yea, I should not be despised. See, so we would rather you have the understanding that the Lord gave us, because this proves that we care. If we didn't care, we wouldn't say anything. And this is why there's so much correction and admonition and reproof and rebuking going on about the MOTB, because that is a very serious prophecy taking place right now in front of the world's face, and individuals out there still playing around. And Bishop Nathaniel's wiggling and sliding and, trying to keep weaving that web so that when the time comes, he said, well, if you listen closely, moron, I always said they were going to throw a microchip in there. Remember, we did that video about paying with the phone, but paying with the, with the RFID or whatever, however, he spins it. But nevertheless, as the Apostle Paul said, whether in sincerity or not, we rejoice that Yahushua is being taught. As long as he teaches the right thing, we know we're not going to get no recognition for it. We know we're not going to get, no apology, because we didn't get the apology for the Cornelius thing. And now a lot of them individuals that, are teaching that Cornelius is an Israelite. Back then that wasn't taught, but, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, that understanding came out. And it was always, kind of coming up. But it finally was cemented, when the elder apostle Gabar, was when we were brought to those councils. But prior to that, the high priest Ariah and high priest Shaw were talking about it. And, I don't know if anyone remembers back then. I'm talking about going back to 1 West. I do remember hearing that high priest Shaw, at that time, I believe he had been like 16 years in the truth, if I'm not mistaken. He was always teaching that Cornelius was an Israelite. So I always believed Cornelius was an Israelite. And then they said that high priest Ariah had to come and correct him on it, set him straight. And he said, for all these 16 years, I always thought Cornelius was an Israelite. Now, this is something I heard. No, I don't know how true it is, but I believe it, because that sounds like something that high priest Shaw would say. But then, it got, swept. It got swept into the rug again, inside joke. And then what happened? It came back again. The high priest Ariah, high priest Shaw. They brought it to Elder Pastor back then. But Elder Pastor was teaching the class, so he hung up the phone, and then, it wasn't time for it to come out. But it kept coming up every once in a while until finally, that's what pretty much, caused the great division and the great kicking out what we labeled as the Cornelius councils. And we never got an apology for that. That was a total demonic, wicked-ass council. And Elder Pastor was right when he told them, guys, I don't want to be a part of this council. Why not? Because it's wicked. And that was a straight-up demonic, wicked council. And the only reason why they had the king there, King Masha, was because they were using his authority, his power. Otherwise, then nobody would have followed them clowns. If King Masha would have stayed with High Priest Ariah at 1 West and them guys would have left, nobody would have followed them. And they knew that. They needed someone, someone's authority. And that's why they took the king with them, getting in his ear, this, that, and the other. But then when they get him over there, to get the king over there, then they mistreat the king. Had this old man in his 80s with a starter jacket, with a hoodie on it, driving in a fucking middle of winter with no fucking heat in the car. And these devils are sitting on at least 30 racks. That's love. Guess what? I'd rather eat eat bitter herbs. You know how the scripture say, better is just bear with me. Better. I remember the first time I heard this was Elder Apostle Gabar mentioned the scripture. It's in the book of Proverbs. Right here, Proverbs 15:17. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. And they had nothing but hate in their black hearts. You know, so much so that before King Mashah passed, I forgot who the individual was, you know, that he came to a brother's table, I believe, and they mentioned, you know, Nate, and King Mashah said, Nate is a devil. And if you ever met King Mashah, that was the most meekest man, the most humble man you would ever meet ever in your life. And for him to say that about you, whoo, man, you know, if you ever met him, you know, that was something. But nevertheless, let's go back. So it says of those who are molding the character of others by reproof and admonition, and that's what we've been doing, beginning with Elder Apostle Tahar and Barakatah Yahweh Bashem El Shai for the spirit the Lord has on that man, you know, and Barakatah Yahweh Bashem El Shai for him being our teacher and molding us and teaching us, you know, and guiding us and being a great example, as a brother, the priest Yashimaf always said, being a great example to the rest of us. You know, it's an honor, you know, to have, you know, he's my favorite teacher anyway. A brother told me that I was his favorite teacher. It was strange, you know, hearing that. But I said, oh, my favorite teacher is Apostle Tahar, you know. So it goes on to say, let's see, of the Most High to chasten by the affliction of evils and calamities. See, so you have to have your mind prepared for this. Sometimes it's what's the word I'm looking for? Sometimes it's there's a word for it. It's merited, right? And sometimes it's just the Lord testing us, like in the case of Job. You know, but nevertheless, it's all what's necessary for us to go through to get us to the next level. And we may not realize it, but those enduring those chastenings and those you know, those trials and tribulations makes us harder in on the inside, you know, because the karate man bleed on the inside. Inside joke. You know, but it's true. It makes us stronger on the inside, even though we may not see it or notice it. And the times that are coming, these perilous times that are coming, we have to be hard inwardly. We got to be more than grunts for what's coming. So this is the road to it. But at the end of the day, when that time comes, the Lord's going to put the spirit on us, Lord, will we be the elect to resist whatever this devil has to offer or bring, you know? So we don't have to worry about it. You know, the Lord's going to, at that moment, give us everything we need. Because who you think gave Yahweh Shai the minerals that he needed to go up on that cross? Yahweh. All right, so let's go back to, there's another word, right? It says, for whom the Lord loveth, he chastens and scourges every son whom he receiveth. So the word there for scourges is the word mastigao, to scourge, to flog. All right. So it means what? To beat. Because what are you beating? You're beating the impurities out of it. It says, folly is set in the heart of a child, but the rod of reproof will drive it far away from him. You know? And we all been through that. We all been through the process of getting our ass beat as children, you know, and then we've also had to whoop our children's asses. But that's just the rite of passage. Scourge, a whip used as an instrument of punishment. A person or thing that causes great trouble or suffering. Whip someone as a punishment, and that's pretty much cause great suffering too. See, that's a scourge too. Because a scourge doesn't have to be something physical. It could be something mental too. All right. So going back to Hebrews chapter 12 and 7, it says, if you endure chastening, the Most High dealeth with you as with sons, for what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if you be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are you bastards and not sons. And that will prove that the Most High don't love you if you ain't catching hell. You know, there's times that the Lord gives us a little respite here and there, you know, just to be able to, you know, to kind of gather ourselves, because, you know, you don't want to, you know, we're not going through the chastening to be destroyed. We're going through the chastening to mold us, you know, perfect us. You know, just like when you being a leader, you know, the scriptures say, fathers or parents, I believe it is, provoke not your sons to wrath. You know, so you got to be hard on brothers, but then at the same time, you got to, you got to back off sometimes. You know, especially if things are running right. You can't just always be a tyrant. We've had fucking horror stories about tyrants over the years. You know, you got to be hard, but then you also got to, there's times where you might give them a good word. You know, you might, encourage them. You might exhort them. That's what the Lord does to us. He kick our ass, but then he'll give us, times where he'll bind us up. You got to know when to be hard. You got to know when to fall back. And you got to know what individual you're dealing with in your camp, their spirit. You got to know if a man, if you got to be harder on a brother, or if you got to, be a little more lenient in your execution of judgment upon that individual. That the movie Excalibur, excellent movie. The apostles put me on to. And the individual, right, Merlin, he told the new king that his father was rash because he said he never learned to read the hearts of men. In other words, you got to get to know your men. You got to get to know who you could be harder on and who you have to be a little more lenient with, because every man is not on the same level. And this is all part of your way to leadership. It says, furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? It says, for they verily for a few days chasten us after their own pleasure. But he, the Most High, Yahweh Shem Shai, for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. And this knowledge is a part of his holiness. You see? And what does the scripture speak about? About wisdom. First, you're taking them through hard ways to see what? If she could trust his soul. Then the secrets are opened up. But you have to go through the chastening. You got to go through the trials and tribulations first. And trust it. Don't feel pleasant. Right? Like it says here, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Hell yeah. It says, nevertheless, afterward, it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. No pain, no gain. You see, on the flip side of it, you see, you see the outcome of it, the benefit of it. It's not easy, but it's necessary. It says, wherefore lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees. Yeah, because we see all the Yahushua said, when you see these things come to pass, lift up your eyes, because pretty much the end is here. Just merely paraphrasing. And make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. See, and that's why these admonition videos, correction videos, and the constant reminding and the constant going into the prophecies, all these are all part of the molding that we have to go through. It says, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. It says, looking diligently lest any man fall of the grace of the Most High, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. You have some individuals that hold on to something, hold on to a grudge, or hold on to something the brothers say, and then, they allow that thing to fester and fester and fester and entertain it and fester. entertained and fast, and it just gets rancid, and it becomes cancerous to the point where this man, some little bullshit, this man just cannot stand this other individual because he never, fought Satan on it. He never pushed that demonic spirit out by examining himself, by meditating on the scriptures, and the such. And then what happens? And then he may get into the ear of another man, and before you know it, you got 10 individuals that demon is on them. This is why you see an individual that ain't right. You see an individual that's not, walking the right path. He's not teaching the correct doctrine. He got to go. And hey, the individuals that left, we wish they would have kept teaching. But it's just this is what it is. No hard feelings. You have a different mindset. You have a different. You're not a part of us, because if you were, you would have continued with us. You wouldn't have been changing your doctrine, even if you would have been separated from the body, for whatever the case may, whatever the case may be, whatever difference or whatever, you would have kept teaching the same thing you were taught. Because sometimes you do have men that just don't get along. And they just have to go their separate ways. But as long as you're both teaching the same thing, you're good. At the end of the day, we're all working for what? For that penny. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. There's no scripture that says, if you're not a part of GMS, you're not going to make it. As long as you're teaching the right doctrine, especially going into the prophecy of the MOTB, which is the microcia, that is very key in understanding and a part of the lead up to salvation. Because if you do teach anything other than that, and the people take those things, they're going to die, but their blood is going to be on your hands. Right? So that's the main point. Least any root of bitterness bringing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Let me see what it says in the NLT. So if you see an individual like that, you have to excommunicate that dude. Excommunicado. He got to go, because he's going to infect the rest of the body. Before you know it, you're going to have half the camp bugged out. So NLT, look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of the Most High. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. See? And that goes into, these wayward doctrines. The scriptures say that in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So you have to be on the watch. And you camp leaders out there, you have a bigger responsibility, because you have to watch out not only for yourself, but you have to watch out for the rest of the flock that the Lord made you an overseer. See? So there's a lot, man. So like I said, the Spirit had me going to this. Obviously somebody or a few people needed to hear this. We all led by the Spirit. I said, whatever the Spirit feeds me, I'll feed you. So with that, I pray that this lesson was edifying. Till the next time I say, Shalom.